Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Trevor Noah talked about the merger. JetBlue announcing it's buying Spirit Airlines for $3.8 billion. Trevor said, yeah, $3.8 billion. What's crazy is that Spirit still charged them $30 for a carry-on bag. That's great, Fallon. Yeah, JetBlue and Spirit. It's the perfect marriage between broken TVs and broken planes. That's right. Spirit agreed to a deal with JetBlue and canceled their merger with Frontier Airlines. Today, Frontier was like, well, Spirit, how did we not see the cancellation coming? All right. Big Dave Chappelle stuff here. Stay with me. Here's going to be the arc. At first, you're going to be like, oh, he's just telling us Dave Chappelle had a show. Then the middle of the arc is going to be like, oh, I see where he's going here. But you got to stay for the third act, okay? All this from the San Francisco Chronicle. Let's start on Friday. Dave Chappelle made history in St. Helena. Next sentence, the foul-mouthed comedian took over the Charles Krug Winery for the first Blue Note Jazz Festival in Napa Valley, bringing together a motley crew of artists to the Black Radio stage for a jam session that featured sax solos, a few jokes, and even some freestyle rap duets. All right, that sounds fun. Chappelle said, ladies and gentlemen, it'll be a great memory tonight. The first night the Blue Note has ever done a jazz festival in Napa Valley. Get ready to get your teeth good and purple, mother effers. We're having some wine tonight. Dave then did 36 minutes about trans jokes. No, I'm kidding. He did not do any trans material from what I could see. Dave took the stage 15 minutes late, adds the Chronicle. For Friday's all-star closing set, Chappelle and the musical collective Dinner Party brought thousands of festival goers to their feet for a nearly 2-hour set. Chappelle told the crowd that he finds himself with his pinky out when he drinks and generally poked fun at wine country's posh and proper reputation. Chappelle rapped to the beat of Notorious B.I.G.'s 95 classic Get Money and proclaimed it was, quote, first time Northern Cali seen so many blacks around, unquote. He then jokingly renamed the town Nappy, sparking uproarious laughter among the intergenerational diverse crowd. Several surprise guests included Cat Williams. Chappelle said, there's no place I'd rather be. This stage is populated by virtuosos. He then called out the last star of the night, Snoop Dogg. He called Snoop a miracle of culture. The same man who rapped bitches ain't S-word has also been on Sesame Street. All right, that was day one. Day two was Saturday. Comedian Dave Chappelle urged fans to make some noise for Blue Note 2022 as the Jazz Festival stretched well beyond the wine country's strict curfew on Saturday. Things got a little disorderly during the second night of the three-day festival after Erykah Badu dropped out of her scheduled appearance shortly before she was set to take the stage with the Grammy-winning pianist and festival artist-in-residence Robert Glasper. Glasper was joined by some musicians and comedian-actor Anthony Anderson. That ran more than an hour over its scheduled end time, pushing back the start time for the evening's headliners, the recently reunited hip-hop duo Black Star. Black Star took the stage around 9:15. By 10 p.m. when St. Helena's noise ordinance policy goes into effect for, quote, any privately owned real property within the city which actively creates noise, the side of the stage was crowded with other festival artists, friends, and family who wanted to keep the party going. As the clock kept ticking, the artists, joined on stage by Glasper and Chappelle, continued performing, going a cappella and dancing even as fans started streaming out, and the festival producers cut the sound and switched on the house lights at 10:30. Chappelle said, we've passed the noise ordinance, but make some noise for Robert Glasper, make some noise for Black Star, make some noise for Blue Note 2022. Among the highlights of day two was a surprise appearance by Cat Williams. All right, let's go on to Sunday and day three. Dave Chappelle broke curfew for a second time during the final night of the Blue Note Jazz Festival in Napa Valley as R&B singer Maxwell wrapped up his headlining set close to 10 p.m. The noise ordinance policy went into effect. Chappelle returned to the stage. He noted that Napa Valley is a place not renowned for its diversity. Chappelle told the audience, this is the blackest weekend it has ever seen. He then ruminated on the significance of staging a concert with rap, jazz, and R&B performers in Northern California's exclusive wine country. Chappelle said, this culture is wherever we put it, whether it's New York or LA or the vineyards of Napa. It's wherever we say it's going to happen. I'm so happy it happened with all you guys this weekend. He then encouraged Robert Glasper to join him on stage again. Robert, real quick, let's be late. They're not going to kill us. We're going to close this festival. We got to go. Trust me on this. The keyboards are right there, Robert. Chappelle turned to the crew and said, don't power him off, turn him back on. Chappelle apologized to the festival organizers, but seemed intent on continuing the show as he did the previous night. Chappelle said, Napa Valley, forgive us for disrespecting your noise ordinance. It's not noise. This is the best America has to offer in music. What a festival. What a weekend. What a group of people standing in front of me. The article says Chappelle then sensed hesitation from the festival staff and crew And Chappelle said, they won't do it. Can you imagine if Martin Luther King wanted to do the I Have a Dream speech, but they wouldn't turn the sound on? The crowd encouraged Dave, who called out again for Glasper. Robert, sit on the piano and hope for the best. We got to close the festival. I'm only here because of you. Make some noise for your band leader, Robert Glasper. You got to do it. You got to do it. Please, whoever's in charge, get us out of here the easy way. Chappelle then threatened to never return to Napa Valley if Glasper wasn't allowed to return to the stage, quoting Dave, I'll never drink a cup of wine from this dusty-ass field. I'll drink Italian wines and French wines and South Africa wines. You cannot shut down Robert Glasper ever. Let that be known. Eventually, some other musicians joined Dave Chappelle for a low-key jam, temporarily allaying his anger. Dave said, guess what, everybody? We just made history. Chappelle urged Glasper once again to join him on stage. Yo, Robert Glasper's got to close this festival. Napa Valley, if you kick us out, we're going to do it in another valley. You're not the only valley in town. Glasper finally returned to the stage to appease Chappelle. They vamped for a few minutes, and by 10:15, everybody was off the stage. Dave Chappelle said, Napa Valley, we'll see you next year. Oh, man, that was fun. From Variety, the annual 10 Comics to Watch panel at the 40th edition of Just for Laughs, Mateo Lane joked about diversions during the pandemic and said, my friends and I just decided we're going to get Fortnite, and it genuinely saved my life. I never laughed that hard because there's a bunch of gays playing Fortnite. You watch straight guys play Fortnite, and they're all like, go left. And we're like, oh my God, look at this. My friend Nick came in, and we're like, hey, Nick, do you think we should go get guns? And he was like, what do you think we should do? Go get guns or sit around and, I should have pre-read this sentence, do stuff to each other with our hands. Pregnant pause. Lane is currently developing an animated half-hour series with Bob the Drag Queen, which is inspired by their comic series Kick-Ass Drag Queen. 9 of the 10 comics selected for the coveted list present at the event. I wonder who is missing. Let's see. Unable to attend, Australian comic Claudia O'Doherty. All right, I mean, that's a long flight. And from ET Online over the weekend, Jerry and Jessica Seinfeld hosted a night of comedy. I wonder what Jessica's set was like. This was out at a private residence in East Hampton, New York. Ooh, it was all some highfalutin guest lists. Gwyneth Paltrow, Naomi Watts, Julianne Moore. They were there to support Good Plus Foundation, a nonprofit created by Jessica Seinfeld that works to dismantle multi-generational poverty. Before closing out the event, guests enjoyed an energetic comedy set by Jim Gaffigan.
Mary went to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews and invited me to get National Canadian Donut Chain coffee. So here I am. I'm looking for the Jim Norton's coffee, and I found it. Thank you, Apple Maps. And now let's go listen to me as I stumble around trying to order in French. Sure, good morning.
Yeah.
2 chocolate donuts and a large iced coffee, please. Yes, please.
Large coffee?
Ice?
Coffee.
Iced coffee, yes, please.
Maybe?
Mary, that was so stressful. Oh my goodness, I'm not familiar with the menu, and the menu's in French, and I can't read the signs, and when I go to Paris and I'm there for like 2-3 days, my half-ass French kind of kicks in, but it's not kicked in. Yeah, it's really bad. And then I went foraging for a straw, and I was getting some looks, and then I realized I'm supposed to drink this iced coffee out of the lid. Back in New Jersey, we're still doing the straw things. Now, I'm an environmentalist. Believe me, I'm in favor of getting rid of the straw, so I'm my own worst problem this morning because I did grab a straw. But boy, can I tell you about Montreal? The hardest thing to do has been to buy a drink at all. I'm going to come up here and open a Wawa, and I'm going to make a crushing with my double big gulp technology. Canadians are going to be like, wait, I just walk in a store and get a drink? Yeah. So, Mary, thank you for going to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. I got myself 2 chocolate donuts, and I didn't acquire an iced coffee that you paid for. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, some behind the scenes. July missed being the most downloaded month by like 150 downloads. So thank you all for listening. I'm not complaining about that. I thought I was going to break the record, but I just missed. So what's interesting to me is as I was doing all the new faces stuff, especially with the episode titles, if you notice, and I cop to this, I keyword stuff the titles with words like Chappelle, Burr, Gaffigan, Gervais, Mulaney. I openly do that. Joe Rogan's another good one. Why? It gets more casual listeners to discover the podcast. So last week, when I went hard on the new faces stuff and I put some names in the titles that people don't recognize, the episodes were down a little bit. Also, on the Apple dashboard, I can see the consumption rate on this podcast. This podcast has a very high consumption rate, like numbers in like the high 90s, meaning if somebody hits play, like 95% of the people will get to the end of the episode. But the new faces ones, and it could have been that the audio was a little shaky, Johnny Mac. Come on, you've been a little kind there. It's interesting to me because one of the things I want to do here is I want to cultivate new comedians and not just every day be like, hey, Joe Rogan said this, Ricky Gervais said that. But when I break from that formula, the numbers go down. Now, this is true in everything in radio. When I ran the comedy stations at SiriusXM, Play the Hits became absolutely clear. People wanted to hear Jeff Dunham and Dane Cook back in the day. If you run a music format, people will complain about repetition, but at the end of the day, they want to hear the hits. And I'm seeing the same thing with the podcast, Play the Hits. A couple things I listened to recently. Mark Maron had on Jerry Harrison from Talking Heads. Not really a comedy episode, but that was very good. The Good One podcast, I think it was a rerun. If it wasn't a rerun, it was an interview they had sat on for a couple of years, but they had on Triumph. Well, they actually had on Robert Smigel, not Triumph, but it was really, really good. And I, on the deck over the weekend, watched Randy Feltface. He's got a couple full specials up on YouTube. Remember, Randy was one of the artists I wanted to see up in Montreal and couldn't make it. Randy Feltface is really, really compelling. I actually shared one of the full shows. I think it was Saturday night I was doing that on the Facebook group page, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast Group, if you want to check that out. So it's Mark Maron with Jerry Harrison of the Talking Heads. Good One with Robert Smigel and Randy Feltface on YouTube. Leslie Jones has a new podcast. It is titled The F-Curry. That second word is spelled F-C-K-R-Y. You're supposed to pronounce it like a dirty word. I'm not going to do that. This is from Earwolf. Her co-host is Lenny Marcus. And I was like, that's weird. Leslie Jones and Lenny Marcus? Lenny's one of those comedians that's been around that you probably haven't heard of. And I was like, what's with that? That's weird. So I kept reading the article and I learned that Leslie Jones and Lenny Marcus have collaborated on several projects, including the 2021 MTV Movie and TV Awards. Lenny Marcus co-wrote Leslie Jones' Netflix comedy special, Leslie Jones' Time Machine, interesting, and executive produced her game show, Supermarket Sweep. All right, so they're friends and they're working together on this new podcast with the dirty name. Leslie Jones said, I have a lot of things to say. I could have shared them on a daytime talk show where I'd have to censor myself. Yeah, assuming someone's giving you a daytime talk show, you're cool and all, but there ain't that many of those. But in a podcast, I could say what I want. On the Dirty Word podcast, you're getting the uncut 100% pure Leslie Jones. If you ever wanted to hang out with me and talk, here's your chance. Lenny Marcus said, Leslie and I talk on the phone all the time. Most of our conversations are us complaining about our lives and the crazy world we live in. Usually just devolves into us cracking each other up. And now you, the listener, get to hear that. Neal Brennan gave a keynote speech at Just for Laughs. The Interrobang had somebody there to check it out. Neal Brennan, who co-created Chappelle's show, talked about the physical attacks on Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock. He said those were the only real attacks on comedy and argued that comedy is not under attack and how comedy is simply under more scrutiny because of changing status in mainstream culture. He shared some brilliant examples of how comedians are trusted, beloved, and welcome before sharing personal stories of how comedy has given him his wildest dreams. And also it takes work, hard work. He closed with some earnest advice. When you're down, the industry will look through you. You can't be in comedy without thinking your career is over 3 or 4 times. I'll say the same for broadcasting/radio. He summed up Just for Laughs in this way. The festival is a lot of sweaty managers I barely know in shorts asking me if I'm going to see John Mulaney. I think people asked me if I was going to see John Mulaney when I was up there. Yeah. The Interrobang also had somebody at New Faces Characters, which is an informal audition for Saturday Night Live. Nick Mestad opened it up with high-energy physical characters such as a dragon and a marionette at a club. He was very inoffensive and engaging. Kira O'Sullivan followed with a collection of sweet and strange act-outs. Hers were very short and elicited moderate laughs. Her song as a ghost who's coming to terms with it was a huge hit. Luke Millington Drake is commanding on stage and did a character who was enraged that people were questioning his ability to ski. And then the writer had to leave. I wasn't there either. Can't kill ya. And from Chortle, a comedian has taught a bot to generate fake Edinburgh Fringe show titles. This is amazing. Ted Hill set up a Twitter feed to share some names thrown up by the AI. All right, you ready for some fake Edinburgh Fringe shows, Lloyd Lauren's Bad with 2 Ds, Josh Guama's podcast Ninja Runs, Matt Ford's The Hot Tim Vine Party, Hannah Futen's Sex Diabong, and Mark Bimes' Suite of My Demon Please. Hill says, I spent about 4 days getting the AI to work, which is used for about 90 seconds of my show, so I wanted to try and get some sort of other use out of it. Sometimes it just copies ones that already exist, and sometimes makes total nonsense. I try to get rid of the 30% at either end of the ridiculous scales. I find it's funnier if they could be even the tiniest bit plausible. Hill's show is called All the President's Man, or did he make that up? Who knows? Hill says, I'm quite a tech-based comedian. I like using technology to get laughs from new, interesting perspectives. And that's your comedy news for today. You can follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your shows, and I'll see you tomorrow.